The final presentation of the day is very special. It's by Ms. Gayle Cook from Cedar Farm, and she's going to talk about the restoration of the plantation.
We have the first slide. The story of Cedar Farm begins for me in 1968 when my husband and I were searching through southern Indiana looking for Cedar Farm, a spot that we had heard about, and we found it. Located on 600 acres, about 30 miles downstream from Louisville and New Albany. It overlooks the Ohio River. Across the river, you see the hills of Kentucky. This is the front yard. This is the landing. This slide was taken in October of '84 when the Delta Queen landed, and 150 Stanford University alums toured the farm to see a restoration in progress. This was the first steamboat to land in 40 years. When the plantation was founded in 1837, the landing was the highway to the outside world. It's where travel, business took place. And we have brought some of that back. This is the row of trees between the river and the house. There are 110 trees in 4 rows. And this is the house itself, sometimes called the Kintner-Withers house. It was built by Jacob Kintner and his wife, Elizabeth. But what appealed to us was not just the house, but the fact that it was a plantation complex that had remained rather unchanged for almost 150 years. When we first went there in 1968, when this slide was taken, we met Julia Withers, descendant of the builder. She died in 1980 at the age of 92, and in 1983, we began negotiating to purchase the house from her estate. This is the way, more or less, it looked while she lived there. And what was so unique about the house itself is that it had never been cleaned out since 1837. Original junk was in the attic, furniture was in the house, documents were in the desks, costumes were hanging in closets. It was a museum in itself. And the outbuildings still existed. This is one of the 3 cabins that remain that were used by the hired families. This is the one-room schoolhouse where the children on the plantation went to school. This is one of 4 barns. There's still a tobacco allotment. This was last year's crop. And this is the cookhouse wing on the back of the house. This was not just a summer kitchen, but was a year-round cookhouse. There were 3 rooms for the cook. She possibly lived there. And then a milk house and an ice house. This shows that after we had done some work. On the far left, the stone part is the ice house. It has 2-foot thick walls. And the melting ice from the ice house ran underneath the building that you see there and cooled the milk house that was underneath the cook's quarters. And this is looking into the ice house where the ice would have been packed into the ice house from a wagon after being cut from a pond. The building that was not there was the carriage house, and this is the foundation. Another look at the stonework. And we rebuilt the carriage house based on the dimensions of the foundation and the verbal instructions from a descendant of the builder. No drawings, just some good carpenters going according to what they were told. We have used this as an interpretive center since then. And this gives you an idea of the layout looking at the back of the house, looking toward the river. The trees you see in the background are in Kentucky. On the left, the carriage house. Under the trees, the schoolhouse. Then the ice house and cookhouse wing. and then the back of the main house. On the 3 sides, just out of camera range, are the 4 barns and 3 cabins. When we started negotiating in the fall of '83, we asked if we could shore up the west wall of the house, which was in danger of falling in during the winter before the sale was complete, and the owners very happily allowed us to do that. This shows you the crack and the disaster we were trying to forestall until our masons could work in the spring. This is a view from the parlor, looking out through the crack. On the right is a little office or library. Things got worse before they got better. This is the day that we forced the wall to fall and then rebuilt it. One of the good side effects of all this is that we now have new flues, because it was the fireplace wall on each end that we had to rebuild, and so now the fireplaces are safe because all the flues are new. The parlor that you just saw now looks like this. That's behind that cupboard is where the crack was, and then you see the door opening into the office, which now looks like this. This is an early Empire, Indiana bookcase. It was built by a Quaker near Richmond in the 1830s, found its way to Florida, where it appeared in American Home Magazine in 1944, and I bought it in Louisville this year. This is a view of one of the bedrooms, another bedroom view, and one of the bedrooms the way it looks now. This is another of the bedrooms. And I've included this slide because the trundle bed is the only piece of furniture that I have been able to buy back from the contents of the house that were sold at auction right before the house itself was put up for sale. It also shows you some of the interior decoration, the textiles, the colors, draperies, the English import carpeting, which is a reproduction of an old pattern, and the wall color schemes were chosen by Linda McLaughlin of Indianapolis. This is a view of the dining room. Over the mantel are the builders, Jacob and Elizabeth Kintner. Those are original photos on loan from the family who wanted them to hang there until we have reproductions of our own made. This is a stairway. This is a schoolhouse, and the schoolhouse afterwards. This is the interior of the school when we started work, and the way it looks now. We preserved on the walls of the schoolhouse this part of the plaster where there was some writing. It's now framed and under glass. Over on the left, there's a date, July 4th, 1890. And on the right are some signatures. There's a judge, someone, a governor, someone, squire, someone, and captain. We think they are children writing their names there. I haven't been able to find a governor by that name. This is the interior of the cookhouse and the way it looks today. The working kitchen is in the cookhouse wing, and then that way we didn't have to intrude upon the main house to put in modern facilities. So it's still the cookhouse. There were some surprises as we worked. On the west wall, when we reinforced the foundation underneath the wall that you saw that we took down, we discovered the beehive oven built underground. No one in the family had remembered that it was there. And in this picture, the workman has built a wood dome, and he's laying the brick over it, and then after the brick set, the wood frame was removed. We also found running under the basement floor from end to end a 20-inch brick conduit. We don't know what it did. We've had lots and lots of guesses. We don't want any more guesses. We just want the facts. The most frequent suggestion is that it carried spring water into the house, and we have seen this in other houses because originally the cooking was done in the basement before the pre-Civil War cookhouse was built. The only problem with that explanation is that the whole farm is remarkably devoid of springs. Cistern water has been used as long as anyone can remember. This is that same room now, finished. We've furnished the basement rooms as they might have looked when they were servants' quarters where the work was done. This is another room in the basement. And this is the wine cellar or storage cellar that runs along the back of the house. Before we did any work, we drew every part of the house and the outbuildings. We photographed every surface and took measurements. And this is one of the things that we photographed because, of course, you can't see it anymore, and that is the hand-split lath inside the house. This is the stacked lath in the schoolhouse. Boards that were roughly 1x4s were stacked from the floor to the ceiling and plastered against. This is a close-up of the artificial graining. Of course, in the early days of the house, they had unlimited beautiful hardwoods, all the cherry and walnut from the woods that they wanted. However, they wanted that stylish artificial graining treatment. So the entire house is artificially grained, and our painters have duplicated it wherever it was necessary to repair it. This is a panel in a door, and you can see that the painter even drew a line and then pretended to open the wood up butterfly fashion, like veneer, in order to make the artificial graining look realistic. We photographed the wallpaper before we removed it. This is the earliest wallpaper, which consisted of the diamond pattern plus borders laid over it in column fashion, breaking up the side walls and then also going around the top and bottom of the hall. This shows where the heat ducts went. The cupboard has been removed in this corner, and the ducting is being put in, and then the cupboards are put back, and they're more shallow than they were. Our heat is provided by wells to natural gas storage under the farm. This is the cupboard now in place. This is a vaulted milk house, a different milk house from the one that's under the cookhouse. We repaired the ceiling of it, and here again the carpenters have formed an arch with wood. They laid the stone and then removed the wood from the inside, and here is that milk house completed with a new front. We photographed the columns before we repaired them to show the, of course, hand-baked brick baked in a curve that surrounds a cedar trunk in the center and then is covered by stucco. Something else we discovered that had been forgotten was a brick patio. This view is looking down from the second floor porch after we had removed the dirt to reveal the pattern of the bricks that went around the front stairway. This is an architectural detail showing the lunette window in the main house and then in the cookhouse, which is actually a rather charming classic building in itself. Well, it's board and batten, but it has cornice returns and some interesting touches. Next to the cookhouse, behind this retaining wall, we hid the air compressors inside that pit that you see, it was covered with a grate. After the auctioneer removed everything that he wanted and the family removed what they wanted in 1983, we sent a student who was out of college during that year and unemployed to go down to the house in the dead of winter, no heat, and catalog everything he could find inside and outside the house. So he removed and boxed nearly 600 items, tagged them, and compiled a catalog. Then after the restoration was done, we moved all the boxes back, we unpacked them, we put the things back in the attic, and these show a few of the things that we did find. On the left, in the front of that case, is the 150-year-old key to the massive lock on the front door, and behind it, the turquoise-colored necklace is made of glass Indian trade beads, and we found those behind a bedroom mantle when we removed it to replaster. Also found a gold ring there. The other small things are in cases, and then the larger things are in the attic. People who went to the auction are now returning things to us. We have some baskets, some clothing, some books, plus the 500 or 600 things that we saved ourselves. And they're all tagged. One of the things we found in the attic, crumpled up with the rags, was a sampler. The MEK stands for Mary Elizabeth Kintner. She was born in 1875. This is a marking sampler. Young girls learn to make initials and numbers in order to mark their linens, so we guessed that this was made in probably 1880 to 85. We also tried to find as many old pictures of the house as we could, and this is the oldest, a drawing made in 1860. It appears on the border of a map of Harrison County. You can't see it here, but we were able to find some details that no longer existed. We also photographed this painting by William Forsythe. It's owned by a man in Indianapolis. It was done in 1897, and it shows the house clearly yellow with white trim and green shutters, and that's the color scheme that we used. Since then, we have found numerous other paintings of the house done in the 1890s showing it painted yellow. William Forsythe spent 2 summers on Cedar Farm. He went with an entourage. There were sometimes as many as 25 people staying there. In fact, he was married there and spent his honeymoon there. This is a William Forsythe painting that we now own of the interior of the wash house on Cedar Farm, done in 1897. The wash house floated away in the Great Flood of 1937, which reached the top step of the front porch steps of the main house. Forsythe, as you know, is one of the Hoosier group of artists that is now very collectible and has even been forged like TC steel. In the attic, we found on artist watercolor paper this painting of a woman playing a violin. It's done in the same period, the 1890s. We, of course, don't know who did it. It's unsigned, but we're starting the rumor that it's a Forsythe also. I couldn't show any of these slides without giving credit to the Pritchett brothers, who are our contractors and have been for 20 years and have done every bit of building that we have done and every bit of restoration. There are 8 Mr. Pritchetts. 3 of them are here. The young man in the center is Joe Pritchett. He was the supervisor of the entire Cedar Farm project, and he lived there for a year and a half while the work was going on. I probably don't have to tell this group this, but a lot of people don't think that the old crafts can be duplicated, and they will tell you that they tore off a beautiful porch because they couldn't find anyone to duplicate or repair the fretwork or something. That just simply isn't true. The Pritchetts can do anything that's been done in the past, and they've done it over and over and over. The arrow points to the Louisville, New Albany area. Cedar Farm is near Laconia, which is on the next tip of Indiana, that southernmost tip just downstream from Louisville. I tried to think of a way to tie in the story of Cedar Farm to a new look at Main Street, so I went to Laconia and I have photographed every public and commercial building in Laconia. And this is the post office, this is the fire department, and this is the shopping mall. In June, as some of you know, things changed in Laconia during 2 days, and they've never been quite the same again. We had a public open house to celebrate the end of our restoration project. We had a glorious 2 days. We had nearly 200 volunteers from the area who acted as guides. They were organized by a wonderful woman named Doris Best, who is a professional PR person. We had hot air balloons, airplanes, and the 1812 militia, mule wagons, the lieutenant governor, arts and crafts in the cabins, and 12,000 people. All those little dots that you see between the front porch of the house and the bottom of the picture are people waiting in line to get into the house. The river is just under the bottom of the picture. We thought we had enough room for 500 cars staked out, and we were gloating over the fact that that would be far more space than we would need. That was all on the left side of the drive that you see, and pretty soon we had doubled it and tripled it, and then pretty soon our farm manager closed his eyes and sacrificed the alfalfa field that's on the right-hand side of the slide.